The wind screamed across the frozen valley, carrying sharp snowflakes that cut against the skin like tiny blades. The human, a lone traveler named Daniel, pulled his worn jacket tighter, but the cold pushed through every layer. His boots crunched over ice, his breath came out in painful clouds, and his legs shook with weakness. He had been walking for hours, searching for any sign of shelter, but the storm kept growing worse. Darkness had swallowed the alien wilderness, and only the pale moon shone through heavy clouds. Daniel's mind began to slow, his thoughts heavy. He knew that if he did not find warmth soon, he would freeze where he stood. Every step felt like lifting stone. His body screamed to rest, to lie down in the snow and let the cold take him. But somewhere deep inside, a small spark of human stubbornness kept him moving forward. The galaxy had laughed at humans for being weak. Yet it was this very stubbornness that had kept Daniel alive through battles, losses, and now this storm. Then, in the distance, he saw it, a faint glow hidden beneath a pile of snow-covered rocks. It flickered weakly like the dying breath of a candle. His heart leapt, forcing his legs to move faster. He stumbled, nearly falling, but pushed forward until he reached it. It was a tent, small and nearly buried by the snow. The faint glow came from a single energy lamp inside. Daniel hesitated, his hand hovering near the flap. Could someone already be inside? Would they accept him? Or drive him away into the storm? He had no choice. So he pulled the flap open and crawled in. The warmth inside was weak but real. A small heat coil hummed in the corner, barely strong enough to keep the space above freezing. Daniel's eyes adjusted, and then he froze. There, curled on a thin blanket, was a girl. Her skin had a faint glow, smooth and pale with a shimmer like moonlight. Her hair was silver white, falling over her shoulders in tangled strands. Her eyes snapped open the moment she sensed him, glowing like amber fire in the dim tent. Daniel's breath caught. She was not human, she was alien. One of the northern tribes rarely seen this far from their homeland. Her body trembled, not from fear but from the brutal cold. She looked weak, fragile, yet her eyes were sharp, filled with both suspicion and pride. Human, she whispered, her voice cracked but steady. What are you doing here? Daniel raised his hand slowly, showing he carried no weapon but a small survival knife. Storm, he said with a dry throat. If I stay out there, I die. Her eyes narrowed. She studied him carefully, her breath coming in shallow bursts. For a moment, Daniel thought she might order him out or even attack him. Then she glanced at the flapping tent door, where the snow hissed and the wind screamed. She sighed, closing her eyes for a moment.
Stay, she whispered, but no closer. Daniel nodded quickly.
Collapsing near the far edge of the tent. The space was small, barely enough for one. Now 2 strangers were forced to share it. The silence stretched long, broken only by the storm outside. As Daniel shivered, he pulled off his backpack and dug through it. He found his last thermal blanket, thin and worn. He looked at her, saw the way her body trembled under her thin clothes. She was worse off than him without thinking too long. He slid the blanket toward her. She blinked in surprise, staring at him. Her kind never expected kindness from humans. Slowly, she reached out and took it, wrapping it around her shoulders. Her lips moved as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. She only gave a small nod, her glowing eyes softer than before. Daniel leaned back against the wall of the tent, his body still cold but his chest strangely warm. Something had shifted. He had given away the only thing keeping him alive. Yet he did not regret it. The alien girl watched him quietly. Confused by his choice, the storm howled louder, shaking the fragile walls of the tent. Outside, the night was merciless, but inside, 2 souls who were never meant to meet now sat in fragile silence. Bound by the storm, Daniel closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him. But his thoughts kept circling. Who was she? Why was she out here alone? And most of all, would either of them survive until morning? The alien girl pulled the blanket tighter, her gaze never leaving the human. Something stirred in her chest, something her people had warned her about. One freezing night, one tent, and a bond that could never be broken. The storm raged outside through the night, snow and ice striking the thin walls of the tent like claws. Inside, the human and the alien girl sat in uneasy silence, the small heater giving just enough warmth to keep their blood from freezing. The space was so small that every breath, every shift, every heartbeat could be heard. Daniel sat with his back against the frozen ground, arms wrapped tight around himself. His fingers were numb, his lips pale. But he tried to stay still, across from him. The alien girl clutched the thermal blanket he had given. Her glowing amber eyes peeked over the edge of the fabric, watching him with a strange mix of suspicion and curiosity. Neither spoke for a long time. Words in such a place felt heavy, and trust was something fragile. Yet the silence itself carried a weight, pressing them closer together even though they sat apart. Finally, the girl broke it. Her voice was soft, cracking like ice under weight. "Why did you give me this?" she asked, fingers brushing the thin blanket. "You need it too." Daniel gave a tired smile, though his face was pale. "Because you needed it more," he said simply. His voice was weak but honest. The girl frowned, lowering the blanket from her chin. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not a human, not even many of her own kind. She had been taught that humans always thought first of themselves. Yet here was one shivering, teeth clattering, who still placed her comfort above his own. The heater sputtered, and a gust of cold wind seeped in through the edges of the tent. For a moment, both flinched. The girl looked at him, then shifted slightly, pulling the blanket wider. "Come closer," she whispered reluctantly. "We both freeze if we stay apart." Daniel hesitated. He knew the danger of trust, but the storm outside left no choice. Slowly, carefully, he moved closer. Their shoulders nearly touched, and the warmth of their bodies mixed. The thin blanket stretched across them both. The silence returned, but it was different this time. Softer, calmer, almost safe. Daniel's heartbeat slowed, though he still felt her glowing eyes on him. He glanced at her, saw the frost on her silver hair, and the exhaustion in her face. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. Careful not to sound demanding, she blinked, caught off guard. "Lyra," she said after a pause. Her voice carried both strength and fragility. "And you, human," Daniel, he answered. His breath clouded between them, and for the first time, her lips curved into a faint smile. Outside, the storm roared, but inside the tent, something else began to stir. Not trust, not yet, but something close to it. As the hours passed, hunger gnawed at their stomachs. Daniel reached into his pack. Pulling out the last ration bar, he broke it in half and offered a piece to her. Her eyes widened again. "You give me food too," she said. "Do you wish to die?" Daniel shook his head, his smile faint but steady. "I don't wish for you to starve either." For a moment she hesitated, staring at the food. Her pride resisted, but her body betrayed her. She took it, nibbling carefully. Her people had taught her that humans were selfish creatures of greed. But this one was rewriting everything she believed. The heat coil flickered, shadows dancing along the walls. The tent creaked, but neither noticed. They were lost in the strange connection forming between them. Lyra studied him, his rugged face, his trembling hands, his weary eyes. Something about him felt different from other humans she had seen. There was no arrogance, no demand in his presence. Only quiet endurance. "Why are you here?" "In this land?" she asked finally, her voice more curious now, less guarded. Daniel leaned his head back, staring at the fabric above them. "Work," he muttered. "Ship broke. Had to travel through this region to find help." "Didn't expect the storm," Lyra nodded slowly. Her gaze thoughtful. She knew how deadly this land could be. Many of her people had perished in storms like this. The fact that he had survived this far already marked him as different. The wind screamed louder, shaking the ground. Lyra shivered. Moving unconsciously closer, Daniel didn't pull away. Instead, he shifted slightly, letting her share more of the blanket's thin warmth. Their shoulders pressed, their breaths mixing in the frozen air. Time passed slowly. The night dragged on like eternity. But within the tent, an unspoken understanding grew. They were no longer two strangers forced together, but two souls fighting the storm side by side. Lyra closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her. Before she drifted into sleep, she whispered softly, so soft he almost didn't hear. "Strange human, you act like my people." "No kinder than them." Daniel didn't answer. He simply looked at her sleeping form, her silver hair falling across her face. He felt the cold biting at his bones, yet his heart warmed strangely. The storm outside screamed and clawed, but inside the small tent, the human and the alien girl shared more than shelter. They shared warmth, trust, and something far deeper than either could yet name. One freezing night, one tent, and a bond was beginning to grow. When the storm finally eased, a pale gray light crept through the thin fabric of the tent. The night of ice and roaring winds had passed, but the cold still pressed against everything. Daniel stirred awake, his body stiff and aching. His stomach twisted painfully, empty for too long. He sat up slowly, brushing frost from his hair across from him. Lyra lay curled beneath the shared blanket. Her silver hair shimmered faintly in the dim light. Her glowing eyes opened at once, sharp even in weariness. She studied him for a moment, then looked down. Her hands pressed against her stomach and her lips tightened as if she didn't want to speak. Daniel noticed. He had seen that look before in war zones, in refugee camps, in the eyes of children who had nothing left. Hunger. He dug through his pack. Though he already knew the bag was nearly empty, only crumbs from the ration bar remained. The last food had been given away the night before. Lyra tried to hide her weakness, sitting up straighter. Her pride would not allow her to beg, but when her stomach growled, the sound filled the small tent. Her face flushed. She turned away quickly. Pretending it was nothing, Daniel gave a small sigh. "You're starving," he said quietly. She stiffened, refusing to look at him. "So am I," he added. His voice was calm, without blame. For a moment, silence fell heavy between them. The storm had locked them together, but hunger was an enemy that tore even the strongest bonds apart. Daniel's head felt light, his body weak. He knew he couldn't last long like this. But when he looked at Lyra, pale and trembling, he felt a strange determination. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small flask. Inside was only a little water, but he handed it to her first. "Drink," he said. She hesitated, eyes narrowing. "What about you?" she asked. Suspicion in her voice, Daniel gave a faint smile. "I'll drink after," he said. His voice was dry, rough, but steady. After a long pause, she took the flask and sipped. Her throat moved as she swallowed. She handed it back reluctantly, their fingers brushing for the first time. A spark passed between them, small but undeniable. The wind outside had softened, but danger still lingered. They couldn't stay in the tent forever. "We need food," Daniel muttered. More to himself than her, he looked toward the flap, where the cold light bled through. "If I can find something out there, we might last another night." Lyra's eyes widened. "You'll die," she whispered. "The storm is weaker, but the cold will kill you still." Her people had strict rules about survival. Never leave shelter until you were sure of warmth and safety. Yet this human was ready to step into death for a chance at food. Daniel shrugged weakly. "Better than starving," he said. He pushed himself up, his body trembling. Lyra's hand shot out. Grabbing his wrist, her touch was cold, but her grip was strong. "Don't," she said firmly. I'll go with you." Her words shocked even herself. She had been raised to never trust humans. But now the thought of letting him walk alone into the frozen wasteland filled her with dread. Daniel met her glowing eyes, saw the fire inside them, and nodded. Together then they prepared slowly, wrapping the thin blanket around their shoulders like a shared cloak. Outside, the world was a frozen grave, trees bent under ice. Snow stretched endless in every direction. Their breath turned white as they stepped out. Every crunch of their boots echoed like breaking glass. They searched for hours, moving through the frozen landscape. The cold chewed at their bones, but they pressed on. Once, they found the remains of a frozen animal, too far gone to eat. Another time, Daniel scraped at the snow to reveal brittle plants, but nothing was edible. Lyra's strength faltered, her knees buckling. Daniel caught her quickly, steadying her. His arms were shaking too, but he refused to let her fall. "Rest a moment," he whispered. She leaned against him, her breath ragged, her glowing eyes meeting his with unspoken gratitude. As they sat in the snow, Daniel broke the silence. "Your people?" he asked softly. "They believe humans are selfish, don't they?" Lyra nodded faintly. "Yes," she whispered. "That is what we were always told." Daniel gave a small laugh, though his voice was rough. "Maybe they were right about some, but not all." He looked at her seriously. "I don't care what your people think of mine. I just know I won't let you die out here." Her heart thudded strangely at his words. She didn't answer, but her fingers tightened around his arm. The cold wind bit at them, but his warmth felt stronger. Finally, as the light began to fade, Daniel spotted something dark against the snow. A cluster of frozen berries clung to a half-buried bush. He scraped at the ice with numb hands, gathering what little remained. The berries were small and bitter, but they were food. They returned to the tent. Collapsing inside with the small handful, Daniel placed them between them, dividing the pieces carefully. He gave her the larger share without hesitation. Lyra stared at him, her eyes softening. "You keep giving," she whispered. "Why?" Daniel looked at her. His lips cracked, his face pale. Because I promised myself. If I survive this storm, I don't survive alone. She swallowed the berries slowly, her gaze never leaving him. Something deep inside her shifted again. The old teachings of her people crumbled in that moment, replaced with something new, something terrifying and beautiful. The hunger still clawed at them both, but a different hunger now stirred within her heart, not for food but for the strange, fragile bond that was forming with the human beside her. The storm had weakened by evening, but the night that followed carried a new kind of danger. The sky above the frozen valley was heavy with black clouds, and the wind blew sharp and restless. Daniel and Lyra sat inside the fragile tent, both worn from hunger and exhaustion. Their breaths mixed in the cold air, and silence wrapped around them like a second blanket. For a while, the world outside seemed calm, too calm. The snow no longer screamed, but instead the air carried strange sounds, low growls echoing faintly through the night. Daniel froze, listening. His soldier's instincts sharpened. Something's out there, he whispered. Lyra's glowing eyes flicked toward the tent flap. Her body stiffened. She knew the sound well. Predators. Her people feared them, creatures with black fur and yellow fangs that hunted in packs. They were drawn to warmth and the smell of weakness. The tent, with its faint light and heat, was like a beacon in the night. The growls grew closer, the crunch of paws in the snow heavy and deliberate. Daniel pulled the small survival knife from his boot, the blade dull but still sharp enough to pierce flesh. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from cold and exhaustion. Lyra clutched the blanket, her body pressing closer to him without thought. Will they attack? Daniel asked in a low voice. His eyes didn't leave the flap. Lyra's answer was grim. Yes, if they sense fear, if they smell weakness, they strike. Her voice trembled, not because of fear alone, but because she knew the odds. Even with her alien strength, she was weak from hunger, and he, though human, had only one small knife. Outside, the snow crunched again, heavier this time. A shadow brushed against the thin wall of the tent. The shape of a snout pressed into the fabric. Sniffing, Daniel held his breath, his heart pounded. Every instinct screamed to fight or run, but he knew the tent was no fortress. If the beast broke through, they would both die. Lyra reached out and gripped his arm tightly. Her hand was cold, but her grip steady. If we fight together, she whispered, her glowing eyes locked with his. In that moment, Daniel felt a strange calm. He nodded once, firm and certain. The flap of the tent shifted suddenly. Pushed by a heavy paw, the thin fabric threatened to tear. Daniel raised the knife, ready. The growl outside turned into a snarl, but then another sound broke through the darkness. A distant roar. The predators froze, their ears twitched, and within seconds, the sound of running paws retreated into the snow. Silence returned, heavy and cold. Daniel kept the knife raised for several long moments before lowering it slowly. His shoulders sagged with relief. Lyra let out a shaky breath. We were lucky, she whispered. Something bigger scared them away. Her voice carried both relief and fear, because if something bigger had arrived, the danger was far from gone. The tent shook with another roar, deeper this time. Rolling across the valley like thunder, Daniel's grip on the knife tightened again. Lyra leaned closer, her glowing eyes wide. Not the pack, she whispered. The beast of the north. Daniel had heard stories from traders, a creature that roamed these frozen lands, tall as a house, claws that could shred metal. It hunted rarely, but when it did, nothing survived. Now, that shadow prowled outside, circling. Its steps shook the ground, its breath heavy in the cold night. Daniel pulled Lyra closer under the blanket, trying to keep their warmth and scent hidden. His heartbeat thundered in his chest. The tent seemed like paper, useless against such power. Lyra pressed against him, trembling not just from cold but from the weight of fear. The beast circled once, twice, then paused. A low growl rumbled through the air. Daniel held his breath, praying silently. He had faced soldiers, machines, and the void of space itself. But this creature, this thing of primal hunger, was beyond all reason. Minutes stretched into hours. The beast finally moved away, its heavy steps fading into the night. Daniel collapsed back, his body drained of all strength. Lyra's head rested against his shoulder. Her breaths came fast, but slowly calmed. You didn't let go, she whispered softly. Her voice was almost a question. Daniel looked at her, his face pale but his eyes steady. I won't, he said simply. Something shifted inside her chest, stronger than before. Her people had told her stories of bonds formed in life and death. She had never believed them, but now sitting beside this human who had faced monsters with her, she felt the truth of those old words. The heater flickered weakly, nearly dead, but the warmth between them grew stronger. Lyra tucked the blanket tighter around them both. Her glowing eyes softened as she whispered, "This night, Daniel, if we live through it, my life will no longer be mine alone." Daniel didn't fully understand her meaning, but he felt the weight of her words. He nodded, silent, as the darkness pressed in again outside. The valley was filled with unseen dangers, but inside, two strangers leaned on each other. Closer than ever, the dangerous night had not broken them. It had bound them tighter, one freezing storm, one small tent, and now even death itself seemed less terrifying because they faced it together. The night of danger passed slowly, but the memory of growls and heavy footsteps stayed inside the tent like ghosts. Daniel sat with his knife still in his hand. Though his strength was gone, beside him, Lyra leaned against his shoulder, her glowing eyes half closed. Her breathing was steady now, but her heart carried something heavier than fear. When the gray light of morning seeped into the fabric walls, the storm had quieted. The air outside was still bitter, but the valley lay silent. Daniel lowered his knife and rubbed his face. His body was weak from hunger and exhaustion, but his mind was restless. He looked at Lyra. She was awake, staring at the dim glow of the dying heater. Her hands gripped the blanket he had given, but her thoughts were far away. He could see it in her eyes. Something troubled her, something she carried but had not spoken. "Lyra," Daniel said softly. His voice was hoarse. "What is it?" She hesitated, her lips parted, but no words came. For a moment she stayed silent, then she whispered, "My people have a law, an old one, older than our cities. Older than our wars." Daniel frowned. His tired mind tried to understand. What kind of law? Her amber eyes turned toward him, glowing faintly in the pale light. "A law of survival," she whispered. "A law of bonds." Daniel waited. His body shivered from cold, but he leaned closer. Listening, Lyra drew a breath, slow and deep. "In the old ways, when a woman of my tribe shares warmth and food with another during a freezing night, it is not survival only, it is binding. It means she has chosen. It means her life is tied to his from that moment. Until death." Her voice trembled as she spoke. The words were heavy, ancient, and they left her lips with a weight that shook her. Daniel blinked, trying to make sense of it. "Chosen," he repeated quietly, as in mate," she finished. Her eyes did not leave his, her face flushed faintly, though her skin still glowed pale. A mate for life, not by ceremony, not by family, but by the storm itself. Daniel froze. The small tent suddenly felt even smaller. His heart thudded in his chest. He remembered the blanket, the food, the way they had pressed together under the thin fabric while death circled outside. He had thought it was survival, nothing more, but to her people, it was something sacred, something eternal. He swallowed, his throat dry. "Lyra, I didn't know," he whispered. "I didn't mean to." Her hand lifted, stopping him. Her eyes burned softly. "You did not mean, but you did. You gave your warmth when you could have kept it. You gave your food when you were starving. You held me when death came close. That is the law of my people. That is the bond." Silence filled the tent. The heater flickered, and outside, snow cracked under the shifting ice. Daniel stared at her. His mind spun with disbelief. A mate for life, chosen not by words but by acts of kindness. Lyra looked away, her voice softer now. "My people will not accept it. They will call me weak, they will call me lost, but I know what happened here. I cannot deny it." She turned back to him, her glowing eyes sharp. "You are mine now, Daniel. And I am yours." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had never believed in destiny, never trusted in fate. He had lived by choices, by survival, by the stubborn will to keep moving. And yet, in this frozen wasteland, with this alien girl who had trusted him against all her teachings, something inside him stirred, something he could not explain. He let out a shaky breath. "If this bond is real, then I won't break it." His words were quiet but certain. For the first time, her lips curved into a true smile, small but filled with warmth. The blanket slid slightly as she leaned closer. Her head rested against his shoulder again. "Then we will survive together," she whispered. The day outside dragged slowly. The hunger remained. The danger still circled. But something inside the tent had changed. It was no longer just two strangers sharing shelter. It was two lives now bound, two hearts carried into the same storm. That evening, as darkness returned, Daniel sat sharpening his knife against a stone. His movements were slow but steady. Lyra watched him quietly, her eyes thoughtful. "Do humans believe in bonds like this?" she asked suddenly. Daniel paused, considering. "Not like this," he admitted. "We have marriage promises, but it's not the storm that decides, it's people. But maybe that's the same in the end. Choosing someone even when the world is against you." Her gaze softened. She reached for his hand, her cold fingers wrapping around his. "Then we are the same," she whispered. The heater's light flickered out completely. The tent plunged into shadows, the cold bit harder, but they pressed together under the blanket, 2 breaths becoming 1. Outside, the predators prowled in the distance, their howls echoing across the valley, but inside, the human and the alien girl faced them not as strangers anymore. They faced them as something more. One freezing night had forced them together, but the secret of her people had bound them forever. The 6th day in the frozen valley began with silence, no storm, no howling wind, only the heavy stillness of snow stretching endless in every direction. Daniel woke first, his body weak but alive. His arm was stiff from where Lyra had slept against him. Her silver hair brushed his chest, her glowing eyes still closed in fragile rest. For a brief moment he allowed himself to breathe. They had survived another night. They had no food left, no heater, and little strength, but somehow, they were still alive. He brushed frost from his coat. Careful not to disturb her, then, faintly, he heard it. A low hum carried across the air. Mechanical, steady, Daniel's heart jumped. It was not the sound of beasts or storms. It was the sound of engines. He rose quickly, shaking her shoulder. "Lyra," he whispered. "Wake up. Someone's coming." Her eyes opened. Glowing wide with alarm, she sat up fast, listening. Her sharp ears caught the sound too. The hum grew louder, a rhythm of machines breaking through the valley. Her body tensed. Her lips parted as she whispered, "Rescue team." Daniel's relief faded when he saw the look on her face. She was not happy, she was afraid. The snow cracked outside as heavy boots landed. Shadows moved past the thin walls of the tent. Then a voice called, sharp and commanding. "Open now." Lyra froze. Her hands clutched the blanket tighter. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He reached for his knife instinctively. The flap ripped open and light spilled in. 3 alien soldiers stood in the snow, tall and armored. Their eyes glowed faintly like Lyra's, but colder. Their weapons gleamed in the pale sun. The leader's voice was harsh. "Lyra, daughter of the North. You live." He glanced at Daniel with disdain. And with a human, Lyra rose slowly, pulling the blanket around her shoulders like a cloak. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled. "I live because of him," she said clearly. "He saved me." The soldiers exchanged dark glances. The leader stepped forward, his tone sharp. "He is human. He does not belong here, leave him, and we will take you home." Daniel stood, weak but unflinching. His knife looked pitiful against their rifles. But he did not step back. His eyes stayed on Lyra. Waiting, the choice was hers. Her chest rose and fell as she drew in breath. Then her voice rang out, "No." The soldiers stiffened. "What?" the leader hissed. "No," she repeated louder. Her glowing eyes blazed. "By the law of our people, by the bond of the storm, he is my chosen mate. My life is tied to his. You cannot take me away." Shock rippled across their faces. One soldier muttered in disbelief, "Impossible." Another spat. "With a human." The leader's eyes hardened. "You disgrace your blood," he growled. "The council will never allow this." Lyra stepped forward, standing taller despite her weakness. "The council does not decide the storm," she said. "The storm decides, and it chose him." The soldiers aimed their weapons at Daniel. Ready to end him, Daniel gripped his knife tighter, ready though he knew he could not win. But Lyra moved in front of him. Her arms spread, her voice fierce. "You kill him. You kill me too." The moment froze. Snow drifted silently. The soldiers hesitated. Her words carried weight, not just of tradition but of truth. No warrior of her tribe would dare break such a bond without consequence. Finally, the leader snarled, lowering his weapon. His voice was sharp with disgust. "Very well, you live, human. But remember this, our people will not forget, they will not forgive. Your presence is a wound upon our law." He turned, signaling the others. "We return. The council will decide her fate." The soldiers withdrew, their boots crunching over the snow. The sound of engines filled the air again as their transport lifted away. The valley fell silent once more. Daniel lowered his knife slowly, his chest heaving. He looked at Lyra. Her body shook, but her eyes were firm. She had defied her people for him. "You didn't have to do that," Daniel whispered. His voice cracked. "Yes," she answered softly. Her gaze locked with his. "I did. The bond is real, Daniel. I will not let them tear it apart." He felt something heavy and unshakable settle in his heart. He had never asked for this bond, never expected it, but now, as she stood before him, proud and unyielding, he knew he could not walk away. The tent felt smaller but stronger. The storm outside had tested them. The beasts had threatened them. And now her own people had come to take her away. Yet still they remained side by side. Lyra placed her hand in his, her fingers cold but steady. "The hardest part has not yet come," she whispered. "The council will call me before them. They will demand I break the bond, but I will not. Not for them. Not for anyone." Daniel squeezed her hand gently. His voice was steady now. Then we faced them together. Her glowing eyes softened. And for the first time, she let her forehead rest against his chest. The snow outside glittered under the faint sun. The valley stood in silence, but inside the tent, two lives that had no reason to meet had now become unbreakable. The unseen rescue had come and gone. But instead of salvation, it had delivered a warning that the world beyond the storm was ready to challenge the bond they had made. But neither the cold, nor beasts, nor soldiers could undo what had been forged in that freezing night. The valley gave way to stone cliffs and ice rivers as the rescue transport carried Daniel and Lyra toward the settlement of her people. The journey was silent. Soldiers sat across from them, their glowing eyes cold, their rifles resting against armored knees. Lyra sat beside Daniel, her hand hidden under the blanket, gripping his tightly. Daniel said nothing, but his mind spun. He had faced storms, beasts, and starvation, but the weight of what was coming felt heavier than all of it. He wasn't stepping into another fight for survival. He was stepping into the heart of her people's law, a law that could tear them apart when they arrived. The settlement spread across a frozen plateau, sharp towers of black stone rising against the pale sky. Fires burned in great pits, smoke drifting upward. The people gathered quickly, whispers rising as they saw her return. But the whispers grew into shouts when they noticed the human at her side. "Human," they hissed. "Unclean, unworthy." Daniel kept his head high. Though every stare cut like a blade, Lyra walked proudly beside him, her blanket flowing behind like a banner. Her eyes never wavered. At the center of the settlement stood the council hall, a circle of tall pillars carved with ancient runes inside. Elders sat on raised stone seats, their faces stern and unyielding. The crowd pressed in around the edges, their glowing eyes burning with curiosity and anger. The leader of the rescue team stepped forward, bowing slightly. "Honored council, we found her alive. But not alone." He gestured toward Daniel, his voice sharp. "She returns bound to a human." The hall erupted with outrage. Shouts filled the air. "Impossible. Shame. Break the bond." Lyra raised her voice, cutting through the noise. "Silence," she commanded. Her voice rang like steel. The crowd faltered, her glowing eyes sweeping across them. She stood tall, her hands clenched at her sides. "Yes, I live because of him. Yes, I share the bond. He gave me his warmth, his food, his strength when death circled us. He did not run, he chose me, and I chose him." The elders leaned forward. Their eyes narrowed. One elder spoke, her voice cold as ice. "You speak of the old law, child. But the bond was meant for our kind, not outsiders. A human cannot be your mate. Break it, or you will be cast out." The words struck the hall like thunder. Daniel's chest tightened. He looked at Lyra, waiting. Fear gnawed at him. Not for himself, but for her. He did not want her to lose her home, her people, because of him. But Lyra's chin lifted higher. Her voice did not shake. "If being cast out is the price of truth, then so be it. The storm chose. I will not break what it made." Gasps spread through the crowd. Some whispered in disbelief, others muttered with secret awe. To defy the council was to defy centuries of power. Daniel's heart pounded. His throat was dry. But when he saw her standing there, unyielding, he knew he could not stay silent. He stepped forward. Those soldiers moved to block him. "Wait," he said. His voice echoed in the hall, rough but steady. "I didn't ask for this bond. I didn't know it existed. But I swear this, I will not betray it. I will not betray her. If you cast her out, you cast me too." and together we will survive with or without your blessing." The words stunned the crowd. A human weak and starving dared to speak before the council, dared to claim a place among them. Some hissed in anger, but others fell into silence. The eldest of the council rose. His voice was deep and heavy with age. "The law of the storm is older than any council, older than any rule. We cannot erase it, we cannot command it. If she claims the bond and he accepts, then it stands." The hall exploded with noise. Some shouted in fury, others in disbelief. But the words of the elder could not be taken back. The bond was real, recognized by their oldest traditions. Lyra turned to Daniel, her glowing eyes filled with both triumph and relief. Her hand found his, holding it tightly before all.
"Then it is done," she said softly.
But firmly enough for all to hear. "I have chosen, he is mine. And I am his." Daniel's chest tightened. His throat burned with words he didn't know how to say. Instead, he simply squeezed her hand. Meeting her gaze, he had not planned for this. Had not dreamed of this, but he felt it. The bond was real. The council dismissed them, the crowd breaking into chaos. Some spat at their feet, others turned away. But a few watched in silence, eyes wide, whispers soft, as if they had witnessed something powerful, something dangerous back in the cold valley. As the day faded into night, Daniel and Lyra stood together. The world against them, but no storm, no beast. No council could break what had been forged. Lyra rested her head against him, her voice a whisper carried by the wind. One freezing night, one tent, and now forever. Daniel wrapped his arm around her, his voice low, steady. Forever. The eternal choice had been made. Not by law, not by council, but by two souls bound in the storm. And nothing in the galaxy could undo it.